My name is Tenzin Dorje, and life in Pangtok has always felt borrowed. Borrowed from stories, borrowed from survival, borrowed from the mountain itself. People think the Himalayas are only snow and stone, but for us, they are living things, unpredictable, ancient, and always waiting to take back what is theirs. I am 28 years old. My skin is wind-chapped, my knuckles surprisingly strong, and my eyes, so everyone says, hold the color of river stones. The mountains raised me with their discipline. My father, Dorje Wangchuk, was once known as the strongest man in Pangtok until the mountains took him in an avalanche when I was 8. My mother, Choden, grieved in silence for many years and still wears her hair wrapped tightly, as if trying to keep memories from escaping. Our house is more shed than home, smelling of pine resin, barley bread, and ancient smoke from winters past. 2 goats, a rusted bicycle, and a battered transistor radio. These are the inherited treasures of my family. Mama's hands have become stiff with age, her left knee swollen from a fall in last year's monsoon. In summer, she tends the small garden, a few potatoes, some beans, and the herbs she refuses to abandon, no matter how sparse the yield. Each evening, she lights yak butter lamps and whispers mantras for her lost husband, her voice thin as snow mist. In Pangtok, the air is thick with stories. Old men sit by the tea shop spinning tales about wandering spirits, river gods, and vanished caravans. As a boy, I listened with rapt attention, heart pounding, unsure if I ever believed, but like all mountain children, I knew better than to mock fate. I had dreams once. I wanted to finish college, maybe teach history, maybe open a tiny bookshop in Manali for lost travelers with stories of their own. For 2 years, I worked in Manali by day and studied by night, filling my notebook with poetry and sketches of distant peaks. But dreams in Pangtok freeze faster than river ice. The loans mounted, the price of medicines spiked, and when Mama's hips gave way and she needed me, I knew I had to come home. Hope can be patient, but necessity is ruthless. 2 years drifted by. I did what I could, loading firewood for neighbors, guiding city hikers looking for adventure in the high valleys, repairing roofs, and translating letters for elders who still mistrusted the written word. It was enough to keep us warm, not enough to keep us safe. One evening, while patching the goat shed, my cousin Norbu visited. Norbu was 3 years older, clever with machines and popular with women, though he spent more time wandering the roadside bars of Keelong than in honest work. He dropped a rough company flyer onto my lap. "Rockridge Fuel Services," he announced, squinting at me as if weighing my worth in rupees. "They're offering 100 Himachali rupees an hour for night work. That's more than most out here." I read the flyer, remote highway outpost. Night operator needed, good pay, must be reliable, isolation required, meals free. "But Norbu," I asked, "why don't you take it?" He grinned, flashing gold-capped teeth. "I did. Once. It's not for city boys and I have places to be." He looked away then, eyes catching on the distant snow-flecked peaks. "There are stories about that station. Locals say the highway dreams at night, dreams with teeth, dreams that call back those who left too soon." Mama overheard and spat once for luck, grumbling about cheating spirits and roads that remember you. But she didn't stop me. She knew, better than anyone, how much I needed the work. Preparing for my first shift, I felt guilt gnawing inside, leaving Mama alone for the nights, trusting the goats would stay contained, hoping the winter wouldn't strip our roof's patience. She pressed her palm to my chest, the same way she used to check if I had fever as a boy. "You will be careful, son. You are Dorje by heart, stubborn like the old cliffs, but never tempt the mountain. If it whispers, you must look away." Before I left, Mama handed me her old prayer beads, dark with age and fragrant with juniper smoke, the thread nearly worn through. "These were your father's. Count 7 prayers each hour you are gone," she whispered, her lips trembling but her eyes unyielding. "It may not keep you safe, but it will keep you remembered." I nodded solemnly, taking the beads, an ancient promise on a fraying cord. My best friend, Lachung, came with me for half the walk toward the outpost. He carried 2 woven scarves, one for luck and one for warmth, and stuffed my battered rucksack with leftover dumplings. We talked in low voices about cricket scores, local gossip, and quietly about our shared fear of being forgotten in the swirling, endless valleys. When the last lights of Pangtok faded behind the ridge, I felt unclothed, uncertain, but fiercely loyal to those I left behind. For us, leaving the village at night is never just travel. It is a gamble against loss, loneliness, and things with no name. Rockridge gas station appeared like a bruise on the mountainside, flat, ugly, stranded in a world that wanted nothing to do with it. Steel gray, with 2 crooked pumps and a lopsided roof heavy with old snow. On the door, the sign read, "Last fuel before the pass. No shelter after dusk." A prayer bell jangled in the wind, but no one answered it. The only other sign of life was a wild dog curled beneath the generator shed, eyes shining silver in the headlights. The bus that dropped me off, old, tired, windows fogged yellow with age, rumbled away without a wave. I was alone, and the world seemed to take a step closer. The building's interior was cleaner than expected. Canned lentils, bags of barley chips, old radios, and 2 lanterns sat near the register. An old wood stove fought bravely against the coming cold. Padma Gurung was already waiting, seated at the counter with his hands folded tight. "Daughter, yes?" he said in a low mountain drawl, looking me over without malice or welcome. Behind him, a shelf lined with shrines, framed pictures of local gods, a white scarf draped over a cracked mirror. Padma wore a patched blue jacket and faded green cap. He smelled faintly of engine oil, tea, and birch smoke. He moved slowly, each movement deliberate, the product of someone who'd lived too long without hurry. "Did you bring food?" he asked, nodding at my rucksack. I handed him the dumplings and he smiled faintly, warming 3 on the cast iron stove. An awkward silence filled the station. Padma stared into the flames, waiting until dusk swallowed the light. "You know the stories?" I shrugged. "My grandmother said never whistle after sunset, never count stars alone, never speak to shadows." He accepted this, gestured for me to sit. The flames flickered between us, chasing old ghosts around the corners of the room. Sitting at that battered metal table, counting my dwindling notes and memorizing the local bus timetable, I felt the ache of hope. The hope that 100 rupees an hour could mend a leaking roof, or pay for Mama's medicines, or maybe send me back to college one day. This sort of hope breeds both courage and folly. I asked Padma, "How often do people take this job?" He laughed, the sound as rough as sand dragged across stone. "If you last a week, I pay you double. Most last 1 night, sometimes 2. Some never quit, but they're not the same when I see them again." He explained the work. "Watch for travelers, serve them if they arrive safely after dusk, but never if they come without headlights. Check generator fuel every hour. Keep main doors locked between midnight and sunrise. Log strange events if you have the patience. Feed the wild dog. He's older than the station and sometimes keeps odd company. He paid me half in advance, making me sign my name in the register with the date, my address, and a shaky promise, and understand the risks." I accept the night. Padma offered me the battered cot in the storage closet, handed me a chipped mug for tea, and gave me the station's only radio, an old box that only played ghostly echoes, weather reports, and sometimes the hymns from over the next mountain. Padma spoke as the sky went gray. "You ever heard about the Shari boot?" I nodded. "Every child fears the stick ghosts at winter." He continued, "They're louder here. Sometimes you'll hear them tapping. A stick on ice, a stick on glass. Don't answer. Don't ask. They lost their way hundreds of years ago, still tracing circles they can't finish." He described other legends. The woman in white Tanashi appears shrouded, crying near the milestones during storms. If you offer her shelter, you'll lose your way home. The mirror soul, sometimes your reflection wants to trade places with the living. If you see it move on its own, never speak its name. Shadow Caravan. Every year during heavy snow, the dead ride headlightless cars in search of warmth. They remember only pain and hunger. Padma's stories blurred the lines between superstition and warning. I realized only then that the rules were not caution. They were a shield against shadow and madness. The Himalayas do not forget. As Padma prepared to leave, his words grew somber. Some nights the wind carries laughter. Some nights you'll see moving lights on the far peaks. It's never rescue parties. My father said those lights belonged to things that built their roads before we built ours. He handed me the torn slip of rules. Never look at the ridges after 1 a.m., he repeated, gripping my shoulder. And never answer after 3. Never serve the dead. The generator thumped. The wild dog howled once, low and mournful, as Padma locked the outer door and shuffled into the night. At 7 p.m., darkness fell hard. Frost crusted the glass, and a moonless black pressed on all sides. I lit the lanterns, checked the pumps, and huddled near the heater. I held Mama's beads tight, counting prayers in whispered breaths. I stared at my reflection just once in the storage closet mirror, hoping I would recognize myself at dawn. Wind keened over the pass, old and cold and hungry. The night shift at Rock Ridge had begun. The darkness outside thickened like a living thing, pressing in on the fragile walls of the gas station. The silence was absolute except for the faint hum of the generator, my only companion in the cold night. I sat behind the counter, gripping the slip of paper with the 7 rules, tracing the faded ink with trembling fingers. 7 rules that claimed they could keep me safe here at the edge of everything. I tried to call out on the landline, but nothing answered, only a heavy silence. The radio was no better, just static and the distant hiss of wind drifting down the valley. I scribbled a note in the register. Shift started, all quiet, generator steady, just to make the hours feel real, to ground myself. At midnight, my eyes caught the black glass of the store window. I remembered the first rule from the paper, and never look at the far peaks after 1 anemone, but the pull was stronger than any warning, just a peek through the cracked blinds. The ridges hung cold and sharp under a broken moon, but something moved there, not snow or falling stones. A shadow slid slowly along the jagged line, like the mountain itself was breathing, watching me. My breath caught, and I slammed the blinds shut, heart roaring like a prayer. At around 1:30, as I tried to steady my nerves with warm tea, a tapping started at the window. A soft, slow tap, tap, tap. Every part of me screamed to ignore it, but I couldn't stop the urge to look. No shape appeared outside, only the glass trembling gently as if somebody was there. I clenched my fists and turned away. The tapping faded, but later I saw twig-like scratches etched in frost on the glass. I thought of the shari-boot, those stick spirits my grandmother warned me about, wandering the forests endlessly in search of warmth. I dared not investigate. Some things are better left unasked. Later, the generator shuddered and the lights flickered, and my heart leapt into my throat. The machine is the only thing holding back the dark, I reminded myself. Scrambling outside into the biting cold, I worked a pull cord until it roared back to life. The tapping resumed, now sounding on the tin roof, as if something was pacing above me. I could hear branches clicking like bones. When I went back inside, something strange caught my eye. A tiny branch lay on the counter, fresh and dripping. I didn't touch it. Some messages I knew were meant only to be seen. 245 came with its own terror. I remember the 4th rule. Stand before the bathroom mirror and remember my name, or risk losing myself. I wiped the fog away and stared hard at my reflection. For a moment, the face staring back wasn't mine. It grinned before I did, teeth sharper, eyes darker, and the beads on my wrist seemed to crawl alive, creeping like tiny snakes up my arm. I froze, squeezed my hands into fists, and forced my own expression back. I bolted from the bathroom, heart pounding, palms slick with cold sweat. Around 3 a.m., a car crept into the lot, a black Jeep with no headlights. I froze. No light meant no service. The man who stepped out didn't leave footprints in the snow, and his eyes were hollow, lips barely moving when he spoke. "Fuel, please." I refused. The voice seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere. When I blinked, both man and Jeep vanished, leaving tracks that were no tracks, a bitter clear ice where snow once lay. As the poisoned hour came, the landline screamed its own warning, ringing sharp and clear in the stagnant air. I stared at the receiver, hands trembling. The second it stopped, I glanced at the register, heart cold. There, in my own handwriting, was a line I had no memory of writing, and I'm still here, waiting at the glass. Let me in. I ripped the page out and shoved it in my pocket. The station felt smaller, heavier somehow. Even the air seemed thick with eyes unseen. I knew the last rule was the worst: never leave until exactly 2 minutes before sunrise, never earlier, never later, or else be claimed by what waits in the dark. The clock crawled slower than death. When the crying started outside, thin, childlike, begging for warmth, I clenched my teeth and didn't look back no matter how much my heart screamed. At 5:56 a.m., I stepped out into the cold morning air. The cries ceased, and the first pale fingers of dawn broke over the horizon. I survived that night, but I knew there would be many more, and the mountain was patient, watching, waiting for my next mistake. The days after my first night at Rockridge were a hollow march through cold light and quiet dread. Each morning, the wind pressed its sharp fingers through the rusted corners of the station, and the silence outside felt thick enough to suffocate. Padma Gurung rode the morning bus in, eyes darker and more guarded than the last time I'd seen him. When he asked if I'd survived the night, I nodded, but it felt like a lie spoken through cracked lips. I was fraying already, bit by bit, thread by thread. The longer I stayed, the heavier the air became, as if the mountain was breathing down my neck, watching, waiting. Days blurred into each other with the slow drip of diesel, the stale smell of snacks, and the soft buzz of the generator. Trips outside to check the pumps grew harder. The valley that seemed so vast by daylight turned into a cavern where shadows moved with intent. There were no stars, only black, thick and impenetrable. By nightfall, a low chanting began to crawl beneath the wind, carried down from the peaks where snow hid ancient secrets. One night, just before midnight, the shadows on the far ridge shifted again. But this time, they didn't just move, they multiplied. Dozens of black shapes spread out like ink spilled across the snow, snaking toward the station like living smoke. I sensed them watching, waiting for me to falter. I recalled the tales from my childhood, the doomed spirits, ancient guardians of these lands they could protect or kill. But these felt wrong, like corrupted echoes of those protectors, twisted souls trapped between worlds. At 2 a.m., the wind whispered like silk over the rooftops. I heard a soft rustling outside, like fabric brushing against frozen glass. I looked up and saw her, the woman in white, drifting between the pumps, wrapped in a shroud of mist and sorrow, face pale and almost translucent. She called my name, voice like distant bells. I slammed the door shut and drew the curtains, heart pounding. But the nightmare didn't stop. She began appearing all around, the milestones, the edges of the parking lot, sometimes just outside the windows, watching, waiting for a chance to enter. I swore I saw her in my dreams, draped in white, lost and weeping, always begging for warmth. The bathroom mirror was no refuge, it was a trap. Each night at 2:45, I forced myself to face it, repeating my name like a mantra. But the reflection was a liar. One night, I smiled, and saw my reflection smile first, wider and crueler, baring teeth sharper than a hunter's blade. The beads on my wrist writhed, slithering up my arm like tiny serpents. But the true betrayal came when the reflection leaned closer and whispered, "You're losing your place. Soon, you will be the one left in the dark." I stumbled back, heart pounding, the mirror's surface rippling like water. At nearly 3, a black vehicle glided into the lot. No lights, no sound but the crunch of snow. My blood froze. The figure who emerged was a pale man, face shifting with the flickering lantern light, but with eyes so hollow I could see my own fear mirrored back. And then, in a nightmare twist, his face morphed into the just-missed features of my cousin Norbu. He whispered my name, voice broken and cold, begging to come inside. Despite the pounding in my chest, I slammed the door and refused. The Jeep evaporated like smoke, leaving only tire marks that glowed icy on the snow. One night the knocks came, Not from outside, but inside. From every wall, every corner, a tap, 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 like bones knocking on brittle wood, escalating to pounding and rapping as if hundreds of ghostly hands begged. I prayed, silently, frantically, but my voice caught in my throat. The wild dog appeared, growling a warning as the pounding turned wild and erratic. I realized then, whatever haunted this place was demanding something. Or someone. At exactly 3:01 a.m., the landline screamed one perfect piercing ring. I sat frozen, desperate not to answer, yet the room thrummed with faint whispers calling my name, weaving icy promises of safety. Then my own voice spoke, from the phone but not me. "You are not safe. They are inside." The line fell silent, and suddenly the station felt hollowed, emptier than before, like a tomb waiting. The generator sputtered and died on a night thick with storm and dread. I stumbled into inky blackness, hands searching for frozen cranks, every muscle shaking. Shadows pooled just beyond my lantern's weak glow, closing in with patient, cruel hunger. A voice hissed close, soft and urgent, "Insert the crank, stay." I jerked the crank, and the generator roared back, splintering the darkness. Each night now the mountain's grip tightened and the air grew thinner. The rules, once mere warnings, became commands from an ancient and merciless power. One night, in the brittle half-dark before dawn, I found a new note beside the rules message, in handwriting not my own. "But you cannot leave. The mountain knows your name. It waits for your next night." The mountain was no longer just a landscape. It was a prison, watching me unravel. I am learning that survival means more than keeping the lights on. It means keeping myself from becoming a part of the darkness I fled. And every night the shadows remember my name. The longer I stayed at Rockridge, the clearer it became. This place was alive, hungry, and patient. The mountain wasn't just watching, it was hunting. Each rule I broke made the shadows shift. Each second I lingered drew them nearer. By now, I was running on frayed nerves, clutching Mama's prayer beads like a lifeline, whispering mantras to keep my mind tethered to reality. But tonight, the last night, would tear down everything I thought I knew. I took my position behind the counter as dusk bled into night, the wind outside moaning a long, mournful song. Padma Gurung had warned me to expect the worst, that the mountain's hunger would come for me in the form I least expected. The generator rattled its steady heartbeat, but I could feel its pulse faltering beneath my hands. The first sign came at midnight. The peaks began to shimmer and ripple, the terrible shifting shadow I had seen before, but now multiplied, crawling closer with every heartbeat. The stars blinked out one by one. At 2:45, I dreaded the bathroom mirror more than anything. Steeling myself, I wiped away the condensation and faced the glass. My reflection stared back for a beat too long, and then it smiled before I did. Worse, it whispered my name with a voice that was mine, but not mine. The beads on my wrist twisted, coiling snake-like, tightening cold fingers around my arm. I tried to pull away, but the mirror was no longer glass. It was a doorway, and something was trying to cross over. Just after 3 a.m., the rattling of the landline vanished into a suffocating silence. Then, the visitor arrived. A figure in black, no headlights, no sound but the crunch of dead snow. My breath caught as the man stepped out, a specter with Norbu's face pulled from memory, begging to be let in. But I knew better. I locked every bolt and drew the curtains tight as the figure's eyes burned into mine through the glass. He did not move but whispered, "You belong to the mountain now." The jeep dissolved into mist, leaving only frozen tracks that burned my skin when I touched them. From that moment, the station became a battleground. Knocks pounded against the glass, slow at first, then frantic, as dozens of phantom hands tried to shatter the windows. The wild dog growled low, fur raised, while shadows spilled across walls and ceilings, crawling like ink swallowed by darkness. I felt cold fingers trace my spine, unseen but real. My prayers turned to shouts in the howling gale. Hashtag the fall of the generator. Then the generator faltered and stopped. The lights died. A crushing, suffocating dark swallowed me whole. I rammed open the door and stumbled into the freezing storm, hands shaking as I clawed at the crank again. Shapes pressed in from the blackness, silent, patient, waiting to claim me. A voice hissed in my ear, thick with ice. Stay with us. Forever. With every ounce of strength, I yanked the cord. The engine roared back to life. As the first streaks of dawn bled into the east, I prepared to leave, for good. But by the door, waiting in the dim light, was a message scrawled in frost and blood on the wall. You can never leave. The mountain knows your name. I grasped Mama's beads, feeling the weight of lost souls in my palms. And then the final horror came. A twisted reflection in the window, my face but not mine, snarling, trapped on the other side. The mountain whispered, cold as the snow who killed my father. You tried to resist. Now we take you. My legs burned as I fled into the night. The mountain's breath was on my neck. Phantom hands tried to drag me back into the darkness. With the sky beginning to bleed light, I pushed harder, faltered, and stumbled through the frozen snowdrifts. Behind me, the shadows screamed, melting away as the sun hit the horizon. I didn't stop running until my lungs burned and the mountain's whispers were just echoes on the wind. I'm here now, safe but broken. The village feels hollow, echoes of the mountain's grip still clinging like frost on my skin. In my pocket, I keep the final rule the mountain left me. Rule 8, if you survive, do not return. The mountain waits, as ever, and it always knows your name,